Daniel Cole stood at attention in the great hall of the royal palace, his eyes fixed forward as the emperor's procession passed before him. He was the only human among 50 alien guards, and even after 10 years of service, he still felt the weight of their sideways glances. They were tall and elegant, their skin shimmering with faint violet patterns that shifted with their moods. Daniel was shorter, broader, and his pale skin marked him as different in ways that no amount of training could erase. The palace on was a wonder of crystal spires and floating platforms, built to catch the light of the twin suns. Daniel had lived here since he was an infant, though he remembered nothing of how he arrived. The warrior caste had raised him. They taught him to fight, to serve, and to never ask questions about his past. He had followed those teachings perfectly, and yet perfection had never been enough to make him belong. Emperor walked at the head of the procession, his ceremonial robes trailing behind him like liquid silver. Beside him walked his daughter, Princess Aura, and Daniel allowed his gaze to shift just slightly as she passed. She was beautiful in the way that stars were beautiful, distant and bright and impossible to touch. Her violet patterns swirled with calm confidence, and her eyes swept across the assembled guards without pausing. But then she stopped. Her eyes found Daniel's face, and something flickered in her expression. Recognition, perhaps, though they had never spoken. Curiosity, certainly. She held his gaze for 3 heartbeats before moving on, and Daniel felt his chest tighten in a way he did not understand. Commander appeared at Daniel's side the moment the procession ended. The older warrior had never hidden his distrust of humans, and his patterns flashed with orange irritation as he spoke. "You were staring at the princess," he said. His voice was low and dangerous. "Know your place, human. You are a tool of the Empire, nothing more." Daniel kept his expression neutral. "I meant no disrespect, Commander. I was simply maintaining visual awareness of the procession as protocol requires." His eyes narrowed, but he could find no fault in the response. The commander turned away without another word, and Daniel released a slow breath. He had learned long ago that survival meant giving them no ammunition. Every word, every action, every expression had to be controlled. That evening, the Emperor summoned all senior guards to the throne room for an announcement. Daniel stood among them, positioned at the back where his human height would not disrupt the formation. The Emperor's voice carried easily through the vast chamber as he explained that 3 allied species would soon arrive for the selection ceremony. Princess had come of age, and it was time for her to choose a marriage partner from among the galaxy's noble houses. The collective would send their prince, a being of chitinous armor and compound eyes. They would offer their ambassador's eldest son, an aquatic creature who would need special chambers filled with water. The Dominion would present Lord himself, a reptilian warrior renowned for his brutality in battle. Daniel listened without reaction, though something cold settled in his stomach. He told himself it was simply concern for the princess's safety during such a politically charged event. He told himself that he had no right to feel anything else. After the announcement, Commander approached him again. "The Emperor has made a special request," said, and his patterns flickered with barely concealed disgust. "You are to serve as Princess' personal guard during the ceremonies. Apparently, His Majesty believes your presence will remind the delegations of humanity's alliance with the Empire." Daniel bowed his head. "I am honored to serve." "Honor has nothing to do with it," replied. "You are a symbol human, nothing more, remember that." The princess's chambers were in the eastern tower, where the morning light streamed through walls of living crystal. Daniel took his position outside her doors the following day, standing motionless as servants and handmaidens came and went. He heard fragments of conversation from within, and once he heard his voice rise with frustration. "I do not wish to be traded like cargo," she said. "I have studied the cultures of a dozen species. I have learned their languages and their histories, and yet my only value is as a political bride." A softer voice responded, one of her handmaidens. "Your Highness, the ceremony is tradition. Your mother accepted it, as did her mother before her." My mother also died young, said quietly, and I never learned why she kept so many secrets. The conversation faded, and Daniel forced himself to focus on his duties rather than the princess's words. But her frustration echoed something in his own heart, a longing to be seen as more than what others expected. He wondered if she knew how much they had in common, the princess and the orphan warrior, both trapped by circumstances they had never chosen. That night emerged from her chambers and found Daniel at his post. She studied him for a long moment, her violet patterns swirling with colors he could not read. "You are the human," she said, "the one they call the Silent Blade." Daniel bowed. "Yes, your highness." "They say you were raised here since infancy," she continued, "that you have no memory of Earth or your human family." "That is correct, your highness." Tilted her head and something softened in her expression. "Do you ever wonder who you were meant to be, before you became what they made you?" Daniel hesitated. The question was dangerous. Personal questions always were, but something in her eyes made him answer honestly. "Every day, your highness, every single day." She nodded slowly, as if his answer confirmed something she had suspected. Then she turned and walked down the corridor toward the sealed wing of the palace, the section that had been closed since her mother's death 15 years ago. Daniel watched her go, knowing he should not follow, knowing that his duty was to remain at his post. But when she paused at the sealed doors and looked back at him, he found himself moving before he could stop. He reached her side as she pressed her palm to the ancient lock, and the doors slid open with a whisper of dust and memory. Inside, the Empress's memorial chamber waited in darkness. Stepped forward and Daniel followed, both of them leaving behind the world they knew for secrets that had been buried far too long. On a pedestal in the center of the room, a small data crystal pulsed with faint light, and on its surface, Daniel could see writing in two languages. One was script, elegant and flowing. The other was English, simple and clear. "For my daughter, when she is ready to know the truth." Reached for the crystal with trembling hands, and Daniel felt the first stirring of a destiny he had never imagined. The data crystal rested in his palm, pulsing with soft blue light that cast shadows across the dusty chamber. She turned it slowly, examining the dual inscriptions, and Daniel watched her expression shift from wonder to frustration. "It is locked," she said. "The crystal requires two separate security protocols to open. One human." She looked up at Daniel with sudden intensity. "My mother encoded this with human biometrics. Why would she do such a thing?" Daniel had no answer. The first contact war had ended before his earliest memories, and everything he knew about humans came from distant reports and the occasional visiting diplomat. He had never understood why he was raised on or who had brought him here. The warrior caste had told him only that he was a war orphan, saved from the destruction and given a chance to serve the Empire. Pressed her thumb to the crystal's surface, and half of the lock disengaged with a soft chime. The other half remained sealed, waiting for human touch. She held the crystal toward Daniel with a question in her eyes. He should refuse. He should remind her that he was merely a guard and that interfering with imperial secrets was far beyond his authority. But curiosity burned in his chest, and the English writing on the crystal seemed to call to something buried deep in his memory. Daniel pressed his thumb to the surface. The crystal hummed, analyzing his DNA, his fingerprint, the unique patterns of his human biology. A second chime sounded, and the crystal began to glow brighter. A holographic image flickered to life above their hands. A human woman appeared, young and beautiful, with brown hair and kind eyes that seemed to look directly at Daniel. She wore a simple diplomat's uniform, but around her wrist was a bracelet marked with an unusual symbol, three interlocking circles surrounding a star. Daniel felt his breath catch. He looked down at his own wrist at the small mark that had been there since infancy. The same symbol, three interlocking circles, a star at the center. The hologram began to speak, but the voice was distorted and broken. Static interrupted every few words, corrupting the message into fragments. My name is, peace was. The child must promise between hour. When she is grown, he will be. The image flickered violently and died. The crystal's glow faded, leaving them in darkness. His voice was barely a whisper. That woman, she wore the same mark you carry. Daniel stared at the dead crystal in her hands. His mind raced through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. A human diplomat involved in secret negotiations with the Empress. A child mentioned in connection with a promise. A symbol that linked him to a woman he had never known. We must restore the message, said. She met his eyes with fierce determination. My mother left this for me. She wanted me to know something, and I will not rest until I understand. The next 7 days passed in a blur of secret meetings and growing tension. During the day, Daniel performed his duties as guard, accompanying her to formal events and standing watch outside her chambers. But each night, they met in the palace archives, working together to repair the corrupted data. The 3 suitor delegations arrived on the 4th day. Daniel stood at attention as their ships descended through the violet skies of, each vessel more impressive than the last. The ship looked like a living hive, all dark angles and clicking mechanisms. The vessel was smooth and organic, filled with water that sloshed visibly through transparent walls. The warship was massive and heavily armed, painted with symbols of conquest and glory. Prince of the Collective was the first to greet the princess. He stood on multiple legs, his compound eyes reflecting her image 100 times over, and his mandibles clicked in what the translators rendered as elaborate compliments. Smiled politely and thanked him for his kind words. Ambassador's son, a young named, spoke to her through a water-filled helmet that made his voice bubble and echo. He was gentle and soft-spoken, and his gifts were beautiful works of underwater art. Accepted them graciously and promised to display them with honor. Lord of the Dominion was last. He was enormous, towering over everyone in the reception hall, his scaled hide marked with scars from countless battles. His eyes were cold and calculating as he looked at, and Daniel felt immediate distrust coiling in his gut. Spoke of power and alliance, of the glory their union would bring to both empires. He made no effort to charm. He simply stated his expectations as if the marriage was already decided. Daniel noticed, gaze lingering on him several times during the reception. The Lord studied him with obvious curiosity, and later, Daniel overheard him asking Commander about the human guard who stood so close to the princess. On the 6th night, finally succeeded in restoring the data crystal. They sat together in the darkened archives, shoulders nearly touching as the hologram flickered back to life. The human woman appeared again, and this time her voice was clear. My name is Cole, she said. If you are watching this, then my son has survived and the time has come for the truth. 15 years ago, I came to as a diplomat seeking peace. The war between humans and had killed millions on both sides. Empress and I worked in secret to end the bloodshed, but we knew that peace treaties could be broken. We needed something stronger. We needed a bond that could not be severed. His image looked down and Daniel realized she was looking at something in her arms. A baby, an infant with pale skin and wide eyes. My son, Daniel, she continued, and I made a pact. Daniel would be raised among the trained in their ways, and when he came of age, he would be bonded to his daughter, a marriage between royal houses, a union of 2 species. This was our gift to the future. This was how we chose to end the war forever. His hand found Daniel's in the darkness. Her fingers were cool against his skin, and her patterns swirled with emotions he was only beginning to understand. I will not live to see this day, his voice continued, growing heavy with sorrow. There are those among my own people who hate the peace I have made. They will come for me soon, but my son will survive, has promised this. And one day when he is grown, he will stand beside her daughter as an equal, not as a symbol, not as a tool, as a partner, as family. The hologram faded. The archives fell silent, and Daniel sat motionless, his entire understanding of himself crumbling into dust. He was not a war orphan. He was a peace offering. His mother had given him a way to end a war, and she had died because of that choice. Turned to face him. Her eyes were bright with tears she refused to shed. "You were promised to me," she said softly. "Before either of us could speak, our mothers chose this path." Daniel looked at the princess who was meant to be his bride, and he did not know whether to feel grateful or betrayed. All he knew was that everything had changed, and nothing would ever be simple again. Daniel did not sleep that night. He sat alone in his small quarters in the guards' barracks, staring at the mark on his wrist as if seeing it for the first time. 3 interlocking circles, a star at the center, his mother's symbol, his birthright, the proof that he was never meant to be a nameless soldier. "Cole," he whispered the name into the darkness, testing how it felt on his tongue. His mother had been a diplomat, a peacemaker, a woman brave enough to give up her only child for the sake of 2 species. She had loved him enough to let him go, and she had died for that love. The following morning, sent a handmaiden to summon him to the archives. They had more work to do, the princess explained through her servant. More fragments of the crystal's data remained unexamined. Daniel found her already waiting when he arrived. She looked tired, her patterns muted with the gray shades of exhaustion, but her eyes were sharp with purpose. She had arranged several old documents on the table before her, records from the final days of the First Contact War. "I spent the night searching through my mother's private files," said. She gestured to the documents. "These are the original peace accords, the public versions that were announced to both empires. But there are references throughout to a secondary agreement, a hidden clause that was never made public." Daniel moved closer to examine the papers. The script was elegant and precise, but he could read it as easily as English after a lifetime of study. He found the references she mentioned, small notations that pointed toward something beyond the main treaty, something personal. "The pact between and," he said. "This is the proof that it was real." Nodded. "My mother was thorough. She documented everything, but she also protected everything. These records were sealed with the same dual security as the crystal. She wanted both of us to discover the truth together." They spent hours piecing together the full story. The war had been devastating for both sides. Human ships had been faster and more numerous, but technology was more advanced. Neither side could claim victory, and the conflict had ground into a brutal stalemate that consumed resources and lives without end. Cole had arrived on as part of a desperate diplomatic mission. Most humans expected her to fail. Many expected her to be killed as a spy. But Empress had seen something in the young diplomat, a genuine desire for peace that matched her own secret hopes. They had worked together for months, negotiating terms that both governments could accept, but had grown increasingly worried that the treaty would not hold. Too many powerful voices on both sides wanted the war to continue. Too many fortunes were being made from weapons and conquest. A simple agreement on paper would not be enough. It was who proposed the solution. She had recently given birth to a son, a child conceived during a brief visit home between negotiations. The father had died in battle before Daniel was born, leaving alone with an infant and a desperate hope for peace. "If our species are to be truly united," the documents quoted as saying, "then let us begin with our children. My son will be raised among your people. He will learn your ways, and when he is grown, he will marry your daughter. Our bloodlines will merge. Our futures will become one. No treaty can be broken when family bonds hold it together." Had agreed. The pact was sealed in secret, witnessed only by 3 trusted advisors on each side. Daniel was brought to as an infant and placed in the care of the warrior caste, where he would be trained and protected until the time came for the truth to be revealed. But never saw her plan fulfilled. Human extremists discovered her role in the secret negotiations. They called her a traitor, a collaborator, a monster who had sold humanity's future to alien invaders. She was assassinated 3 months after the war ended, killed by the very people she had tried to save. Mourned her friend in private. She kept the pact secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. But that moment never came. Political complications arose. New threats emerged. And then herself grew ill and died, taking the secret to her grave. Until now. Daniel finished reading the final document and sat back in his chair. His hands were trembling slightly, though he tried to hide it. My mother gave everything for this peace. Her child, her reputation, her life. And no one knows. No one remembers her sacrifice. I will remember, said softly. She reached across the table and touched his hand. And I will make sure the galaxy remembers too. A sound at the archive door made them both freeze. The heavy panels swung open. An emperor stepped into the room. His guards remained outside, but his presence alone was enough to fill the space with authority and weight. Rose quickly, her patterns flashing with alarm. Father, I can explain. Raised a hand to silence her. He walked slowly toward the table, his ancient eyes moving across the scattered documents and the data crystal that still lay between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired and heavy. You do not need to explain, daughter. I have known the truth since the day you were born. Daniel stood at attention, uncertain whether to speak or remain silent. The emperor's gaze settled on him, studying him with an intensity that seemed to pierce through all his careful defenses. Cole was a remarkable woman, said. I met her only twice, but I understood immediately why my wife loved her as a sister. They shared the same fire, the same belief that tomorrow could be better than today. When died, wept for 3 days. She made me promise to protect you, Daniel, to raise you with honor and keep you safe until the pact could be fulfilled. Why did you wait so long? Demanded. Why keep this secret for 15 years? Sighed, because the galaxy is not as simple as your mothers hoped. They have spent years positioning themselves for alliance with our empire through marriage. If I reveal the pact now, they will feel betrayed. They will see it as a deception, a political manipulation designed to keep them at arm's length while we secretly allied with humanity. They would be wrong, said fiercely. They would be angry, corrected, and anger leads to war. The Dominion alone could devastate our outer colonies before our fleets could respond. Lord did not come here to be refused. He came here to claim a prize. Daniel spoke for the first time. Then what do we do? The emperor looked at him with something that might have been respect. We proceed carefully. The selection ceremony will continue as planned. But when the moment comes to announce your choice, you must be prepared for the consequences. If you honor the pact, you may be choosing war. Then I choose war, said without hesitation. My mother made a promise, I will not break it. Smiled sadly. You truly are your mother's daughter. He turned to Daniel. And you, young man, you have served my family faithfully for 10 years without knowing why. Now that you know the truth, what will you do? Daniel straightened his shoulders. He thought of Cole, the mother he had never known, the woman who had believed that peace was worth any sacrifice. He thought of the princess who was willing to risk everything for a promise made before she was born. I will stand with her, Daniel said. Whatever comes, I will stand with her until the end. Nodded slowly. Then prepare yourselves. The ceremony is in 3 days and the storm is already gathering. The days before the selection ceremony were filled with elaborate rituals and growing tension. Each suitor had private audiences with carefully choreographed meetings where they presented their visions of the future and the advantages their union would bring. Daniel stood guard at every meeting, invisible and silent, watching the princess navigate waters that grew more dangerous by the hour. Prince of the Collective spoke of trade agreements and technological exchange. His compound eyes reflected its image as he clicked through proposals for joint research facilities and shared military protocols. He was polite and practical, treating the marriage as a business transaction rather than a personal bond. Thanked him for his thorough presentation, and promised to consider his offer carefully. Though was different. He spoke of art and culture, of the beauty that could be created when two species learn to appreciate each other's perspectives. His voice bubbled gently through his water-filled helmet as he described underwater cities and luminescent forests. He seemed genuinely kind, and his responses were warmer with him than with the prince. But Daniel noticed that her eyes did not light up, her patterns did not shift with genuine interest. She was performing courtesy, not feeling connection. Lord's audience was the most difficult. The warrior towered over, his hide gleaming in the chamber's light, and his cold eyes tracked her every movement like a predator watching prey. He spoke of conquest and expansion, of the glory that could bring to the through their combined military might. He made it clear that he considered the marriage already decided, that its role was simply to accept the inevitable. Daniel's hands tightened into fists as he listened. Every instinct screamed at him to step forward, to place himself between the princess and this monster who saw her as nothing but a trophy. But he forced himself to remain still. His time would come. Not yet. After left, collapsed into a chair and pressed her hands against her face. "He is terrifying," she whispered. "He looks at me like I am a conquest already completed, like my thoughts and feelings mean nothing." Daniel moved closer, breaking protocol to stand beside her. "You will never belong to him. I promise you that." She looked up at him with violet patterns swirling through shades of hope and fear. "The pact binds us, Daniel, but I need to know. If there were no pact, no promise between our mothers, would you still stand beside me?" The question caught him off guard. He had spent so little time thinking about what he wanted. His entire life had been built around duty and service, around following orders and meeting expectations. But when he looked at, something deeper stirred in his chest, something that had nothing to do with ancient promises. "Yes," he said simply, "I would." The night before the ceremony, Daniel patrolled the palace gardens alone. The twin moons have hung low in the sky, casting silver light across the crystal flowers and floating pathways. He needed time to think, to prepare himself for what was coming. Tomorrow would change everything. A sound behind him made him spin around, his hand moving to his weapon. Lord emerged from the shadows, his massive form blocking the path. The eyes gleamed with cold intelligence as he studied the human warrior. "You are the one they call the Silent Blade," said. His voice was a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through Daniel's bones. "I have been watching you. You stand too close to the princess. You look at her too often. You are not merely a guard." Daniel kept his hand on his weapon. "I serve Her Highness as duty requires, nothing more." Laughed, a harsh sound like stones grinding together. "Do not lie to me, human. I have spies throughout this palace. I know about your secret meetings in the archives. I know about the data crystal and the messages you have unlocked. I know about the pact." Daniel's blood ran cold. How long had known? What else had his spies discovered? "I do not care about ancient promises made by dead women," continued. He stepped closer, his bulk filling Daniel's vision. "Will be mine. The Dominion will have its alliance with the Empire, and you will disappear quietly or you will disappear painfully. The choice is yours." Daniel did not move. He had faced countless opponents in the training halls, had proven himself against the best warriors that could produce, but was different. The Lord radiated danger in a way that went beyond mere physical threat. "I will not abandon her," Daniel said. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. "Whatever you threaten, whatever you do, I will stand beside her until the end." His eyes narrowed. "Then you choose death." The moved faster than something his size should be capable of moving. His clawed hand shot toward Daniel's throat, sharp enough to tear through armor and bone. But Daniel had trained for this moment his entire life. He twisted aside, letting the blow pass within inches of his neck, and drew his blade in a single fluid motion. They fought in the moonlit garden, weapons clashing with sounds that echoed off the crystal spires. Was stronger and more experienced, his strikes carrying enough force to shatter stone. But Daniel was faster and more precise, using the narrow pathways and floating platforms to neutralize the disadvantages. The battle lasted only minutes, but each second felt like an hour. Daniel took cuts on his arm and side, wounds that burned with toxic venom, suffered gashes across his chest and legs, marks that would leave permanent scars. Neither could claim clear advantage. Finally, Daniel saw his opening, overextended a killing blow, leaving his balance compromised for just a fraction of a second. Daniel dropped low, swept his legs, and brought his blade to rest against throat before the larger warrior could recover. "Yield," Daniel said. He was breathing hard, his wounds throbbing, but his hand was steady. "I have no desire to kill you. Yield and this ends." Stared up at him with something that might have been disbelief. No human has ever defeated me in combat. No human has ever shown me mercy. He was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I yield." Daniel stepped back, allowing the to rise. He kept his blade ready, but made no move to continue the fight. Instead, the massive warrior simply stared at him with new evaluation in his cold eyes. "You are not what I expected," human said. "Perhaps there is more to your species than I understood." Movement at the edge of the garden caught Daniel's attention. Servants had gathered, drawn by the sounds of combat. They had witnessed everything. By morning, the entire palace would know what had happened. The secret of the Pact was out, the storm had arrived, and tomorrow everything would be decided. Appeared at the edge of the crowd, her patterns blazing with fear and fury. She pushed through the servants and ran to Daniel's side, her hands finding his wounds with desperate concern. When she looked up at him, her eyes were filled with tears she refused to shed. "You could have died," she said, "for me. You almost died for me." Daniel touched her face gently, leaving a smear of blood across her violet skin. "Some things are worth dying for." Behind them, Lord watched in silence, and somewhere in his cold heart, something began to shift. The grand arena of had not seen such a gathering in 100 years. Thousands of citizens filled the crystalline stands, their patterns shifting in waves of color that reflected their collective excitement and anxiety. Representatives from a dozen allied species occupied the honored viewing platforms, and holographic cameras broadcast the ceremony to billions of watching eyes across the galaxy. Emperor sat upon his throne at the highest point of the arena, his face carefully neutral despite the tension that radiated from his posture. Beside him stood the three suitor delegations, each waiting with varying degrees of patience for the selection ceremony to begin. Prince of the stood motionless, his compound eyes fixed on the central platform where would soon appear. Of the floated gently in his mobile water chamber, his soft features calm and accepting. Lord loomed behind them both, his wounds from the previous night barely hidden beneath ceremonial armor. His eyes burned with cold intensity, but something in his stance had changed since his defeat at Daniel's hands. Daniel stood among the royal guards at the arena's edge, his own injuries treated but still painful. Commander had tried to exclude him from the ceremony, citing his involvement in the previous night's disturbance. But the Emperor had overruled the commander with a single word, and now Daniel watched from his assigned position as the most important moment of his life approached. Trumpets sounded across the arena. The crowd fell silent, and Princess Aura emerged onto the central platform, dressed in ceremonial robes that shimmered with the light of both suns. She was beautiful and fierce, her patterns blazing with determination, and when she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the vast space. "I am daughter of, heir to the throne of the Empire." She paused, letting the weight of her titles settle over the crowd. "I have heard the proposals of three noble houses. I have considered the advantages each alliance would bring, and I have made my choice." The arena held its breath. Prince leaned forward slightly. Patterns flickered with nervous hope. Lord's claws tightened against the railing of his platform. "I reject all three proposals," declared. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The suitor delegations erupted in outraged whispers. I invoke the ancient right of the trial of true choosing. I will select my own bonded partner, and any who dispute my choice may challenge my champion in single combat. Chaos exploded across the arena. The delegation to consult among themselves. They exchanged confused glances. Lord roared with fury, his voice cutting through the noise like thunder. "This is an insult," he bellowed. "The Dominion will not be dismissed like common petitioners. We demand satisfaction." Emperor rose from his throne, and his presence commanded immediate silence. Before any challenge is issued, the truth must be revealed. He gestured, and holographic projectors around the arena activated. Smother appeared, her face gentle and wise, her voice echoing across the assembled crowd. Message played for all to see. She spoke of the war, of the secret negotiations, of the friendship she had formed with a human diplomat named Cole. She explained the pact, the promise that their children would be united in marriage, and the hope that this bond would create lasting peace between humans and— When the message ended, spoke again. "My daughter was promised to the son of Cole before either of them could speak. That son stands among us today. He has served our empire faithfully for 10 years without knowing his true identity. Now I reveal him to the galaxy." Daniel Cole stepped forward. Daniel walked across the arena floor, feeling the weight of billions of watching eyes. His wounds throbbed with each step, but he kept his shoulders straight and his gaze fixed on. When he reached the central platform, he knelt before her as tradition required. "I am Daniel Cole," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "Son of Cole, raised among the trained in the ways of war and peace. If you will have me, I pledge my life to your service, not as a guard, not as a symbol, as a partner, as family." His eyes shone with tears as she reached down to take his hand. She raised him to his feet and turned to face the crowd. "This is my choice," she declared. "This is the man I will bond with. This is the future our mothers dreamed of." The delegation bowed low, their prince clicking in the formal language of acceptance. "The pact is sacred," he said. "We honor it and withdraw our proposal with respect." The followed suit, his gentle voice offering congratulations and wishes for happiness. "The waters of understanding run deep between our peoples," he said. "We celebrate this union." Only Lord remained defiant. His massive form trembled with barely contained rage as he stepped onto the arena floor. "I do not accept this pact," he growled. "A human cannot claim what should belong to. I challenge this champion. I will prove my worth in blood." Daniel stepped forward without hesitation. He had expected this. He had prepared for this. The wounds from their previous battle still burned in his flesh, but he would not back down. Drew 2 plasma blades from sheaths on his back, the weapons humming with deadly energy. Daniel drew his own sword, a single curved blade of steel. They faced each other across the arena floor while the galaxy watched. The duel began. Was even more dangerous than before, his pride wounded and his fury unleashed. He attacked with devastating combinations, each strike powerful enough to cleave through stone. Daniel retreated, giving ground, studying the patterns of his opponent's assault. The arena crowd gasped with each exchange, watched with her hands pressed against her chest, her patterns swirling with fear and hope. Emperor's face was carved from stone, revealing nothing. Daniel took more wounds, a slash across his chest, a cut on his thigh. The venom burned through his blood, slowing his reactions, clouding his vision, pressed his advantage, driving Daniel toward the arena's edge. But then Daniel remembered something. He remembered the gardens of Earth that he had never seen but somehow knew. He remembered his mother's face, brave and kind, willing to sacrifice everything for peace. He remembered his hand in his, cool and steady, trusting him completely. He stopped retreating, swung both blades in a killing arc, expecting Daniel to dodge or block. Instead, Daniel dropped his weapon and lunged forward, inside the reach of the plasma blades. He caught arms, locked them, and used this own momentum to throw him to the ground. Before could recover, Daniel was on top of him. Human hands closed around his throat, not to kill, but to control. Daniel's body pinned the larger warrior's arms, neutralizing his superior strength. "Yield," Daniel said. The word came out rough, strained by pain and exhaustion. "You have lost. Twice now I have shown you mercy. Will you force me to kill you?" Struggled for a long moment, his eyes blazing with hatred. But slowly something changed. The hatred faded, replaced by something that might have been respect. His body relaxed, his claws unclenched. "I yield," said. The words seemed to cost him everything. "You have proven yourself human. The Dominion acknowledges the Pact." The arena erupted in cheers. Daniel released his opponent and rose on shaking legs. Ran to his side, her arms wrapping around him, her patterns blazing with joy and relief. The ceremony concluded as tradition demanded. Daniel and stood together before the Emperor, their hands joined, their futures intertwined. Blessed the union with ancient words that echoed through the arena and across the galaxy. Later, as the celebrations continued throughout the palace, Daniel and stood alone on a balcony overlooking the cheering crowds. The twin moons rose in the violet sky, and the crystal spires of the city gleamed with reflected light. "Do you resent it?" asked softly, "being promised to me before you could choose?" Daniel looked at the princess who was now his bonded partner. He thought of everything that had brought them to this moment. The mothers who had dreamed of peace, the years of training and duty, the secrets and revelations, the battles fought and won. "I spent my whole life searching for where I belonged," he said. "Now I know. My place was always at your side." He took her hand and smiled. "I would choose no other path." A message arrived as they watched the celebration below. Earth's government had formally requested an audience with their lost son, now a prince of the empire. It was the first step toward true unity between humanity and the stars. Daniel Cole, son of a diplomat and a warrior, stood between two worlds. And for the first time in his life, he truly understood why he had been born. Some bonds were forged in blood. Some were written in stars. But the strongest bonds were those made by choice, when hearts recognized what destiny had always known. The future belonged to those brave enough to reach for it, and humanity, as always, would never stop reaching.